Shanmuga sir. Sir, you can stay back. Okay. Yeah. So Shanmuga is the Director, Architect and Chief Evangelist with Denodo, APAC. To give you a background, a technologist with a career spanning more than 20 years, mostly in data management and analytics. Shan has generated extensive experience in the area of digital transformation, enterprise data management, enterprise architecture, business advisory, advanced analytics solution, analytics lifecycle management, cloud architecture, innovation center, enterprise customer intelligence management, enterprise fraud management, and enterprise risk management, to name a few. Can we welcome Shanmuga with a big round of applause?
Namaste, namaskaram, vanakkam. Thank you for the introduction. So the topic I'm going to talk about today is interesting because the previous speakers actually touched on it a little bit. I think Geeta touched on governance. I think Vijay touched on the data being the center of organization. Entire process with regards to digital transformation, for example, it's actually piggyback on data as the key aspects. So let's explore a little bit more. And Sandeep, I need to be sorry, I'll be using some jargons. I know that you say no jargons, but excuse me, I will be using some jargons to introduce, the concept that we are talking about. Okay, so let's move on. If you realize what is listed here, of course, previous presenters talked about fourth industrial revolution. They talked about 5G. They talked about digital transformation. If you look at all that aspects, it's actually changing and transforming organization in many, many ways, big ways. But fundamentally, when we look at under the hoods, what are the key aspects that organizations are driving towards, right? May it be cloud migration, digital transformation, or may it be specific projects like the AI options there, right? AI, ML, okay, it's very small. Can you guys see the laser? Doesn't matter, right? AA, ML, AI projects. If you look at the other aspects of, we want to be able to adopt and be disruptive in the organization, right, in the business. It is all driving towards data. So finally, the concept here is that if you be able to manage the data well, hopefully we can achieve all this, right? And nothing best describing this, by Mr. Edward here. He says that, we believe in God and we trust in God, but everything else, please bring data, right? But the fact of the matter is, it is not as easy as we all think, and it's also not easy as what we all, when we go into a project. The reason is, when we look at the underlying data strategy, data architecture in every organization, right, in many organizations, maybe not in your organization, but I'm talking about in general, right? We see that there are multiple databases all over the place. There are multiple, application that is consuming data, producing data. And over time, we also realize that, hey, I need to do something about managing data. So what we will do, we will actually implement a lot of ETL processes, right? ETL process all over the place. Over time, things change, right? E-commerce came by, web, take a big move into the organization. All that actually delivered different perspective of data, right? The data that we have not seen before. Now, how do we manage that? For example, unstructured data. Now, that actually delivered into us implementing big data, for example, data lakes, for example. Now, it is actually keep on growing. But the fact of the matter here is that we've actually been taught and we actually learned the fact that we need to copy data and use that copied data to do business, right? To do projects, to do any other initiative that's in the organization. But the fact of the matter is, if I actually add this data layer and deliver the context of consumption on top, this is how the user's application coming and consuming, we realize that is the picture becoming much more messier, right? So how do we go about handling our business in a very fast, agile, time that we are in, and to able to bring the discussion in terms of our modernization of organization moving forward, right? It's a big question. Now, we actually try to go under the hoods and say, why are we in this mess? Then the question comes very clear. It is because the data strategy that we've been following or we've been implementing in the organization, right? I like to use this chart from Gartner. Quite interesting in terms of how they explain what actually been the cycle of consolidation that happened in the organization. So in the early 80s, if you realize we have mainframes, we have big systems, we have operational systems, people thought that, organizations thought that I need to actually make sense of this data. So what they do, they actually build reporting layer on top, right? We build cubes, we build reports on top, but we quickly realized that that is not good enough, right? Because when the system keep growing, we realize that there's immense data being produced. We need to be able to manage that. So how do you go about doing it? Of course, this is when our friends from the other parts of the world, Bill Inman, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, came up with this idea that why don't we consolidate data, right? Why don't we copy data, consolidate data in a form that we can use? And this is when it gave birth to the concept of data warehousing, data marts, and so on, right? But very soon we realized, as we move on, this is actually still not good enough, right? For example, Vijay, I think, mentioned about IoT, right? IoT creates another set of data which is very, very fast in real time, and that is something that we need to manage. How do that can go into the data warehouse? It's a big question mark, right? And then I think in the insurance world, we realized that there's a lot of unstructured data coming into picture. How do then we manage that as part of data warehouse? It's always a challenge, because data warehouse, when we initially conceptualize it, it's not meant for that purpose, right? So that is when we went ahead and built data lakes, big data, and many other concepts that has actually came into the organization, and suddenly we realized that the consolidation of data becoming bigger and bigger, and many of the times it is always application-centric data construct that we build, right? For example, in a bank, in many banks that I work in, they build risk solution. For risk solution, what they do is, I cannot actually use the data from my data warehouse. What do? I consolidate data, copy data, consolidate data, create a mart for my risk project. If I go into another, like a government, kind of implementation, I want to go and implement a terrorist system, okay, terrorist detection system. What do? I cannot use my data warehouse, right, because it doesn't have all the data that I need, right? Some of the data actually coming in API-based architecture. My data warehouse cannot handle that. My data lake cannot handle that. So then I go ahead and create another data mart for my terrorist detection system. And if you realize so lack of better word, is bad habit, right? It's actually keep on going and growing and growing. And suddenly we realize that it's never ending in terms of this concept of copying data, replicating data, and keep growing in terms of the data. And that's the reason why many organizations is actually grappling with the costs relating to data growth. But they can be better managed, right? Let's explore a little bit more about it. And this report actually came up maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And in this case, Gartner recommends, right? By doing this, we are not solving all the problems, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? The idea here is that why don't we go logical, right? So I'm actually introducing a concept, another jargon here, right? We're actually moving away from the concept of monolithic, right? This is what we call as monolithic, meaning I need to copy the data every time I need the data and consolidate that, replicate, right? And if you realize the same copy of data could exist in the organization multiple times, right? And that's not going to help us, right? Help organization move forward. But the way to move forward is what we call as the logical architecture, logical data architecture, right? And throughout this discussion, I will actually talk a little bit more about what this logical data strategy, logical data concept is all about, right? Hopefully we'll go with that. Now, very interesting, right? This report, as I said, came out about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Interestingly, we in Denodo and our founder, Angel, right, actually believed in this concept of data virtualization, or simply put, logical data strategy, way before all this discussion came about. In 90s, we already thought about it, the product already delivered to customers. And many of the customers who actually been with us during that time are still there and keep on growing. I'll actually share one example later on, right? So the idea I want to leave behind in this particular diagram is we need to think about new innovative ways of managing data, right? We all know that, and this is true experience, right? To my own experience in 25 years in data management and helping many, many organizations, monolithic, it does solve some problems. It does have its use cases in the organization, right? But it's not the solution for all the problems. So we are not saying that throw away your data warehouse. We are not saying that throw away your big data. We are not saying that throw away your lake. Keep it there because it is actually purpose-built. It is actually solving a problem in the business. But what about the key question that keep on coming back to us, right, as CIOs? I want to have a consolidated layer of data that is representative of my business that I can deliver to my business users, right, business applications, so that it can actually function with a cohesive view and central view and unified view of secured, governed data. And all this need to be done because now CIOs, we are concerned about cost, right? All this need to be done without, making a big hole into the pocket of the organization. How? The strategy here is logical data strategy. Okay, let's explore a little bit more about it on this context, right? When we say logical data strategy, I will actually explain, coming back to this, right? So if this is a mess that we are, not you guys, huh? I'm talking about other organizations out there with this mess, how do we solve this problem? The way to move forward is if I can actually apply a logical data layer that is going to streamline, right, your data, secured, governed, but the key concept here is without replicating and duplicating your data, right? So this is what it means by logical. So I'm actually bringing your data up, giving the business context to it, delivering it to the users who are going to use it, but I'm not copying the data. I'm not replicating the data. That's the concept, right? And behind the scene, if I actually successfully do that, I can actually deliver this data layer, this logical data layer, to whatever downstream use cases that you might have in your organization. And at this point, I could just highlight that banking, financial sector is very big consumers or users of Denodo. Next, I would say many of the high-tech manufacturing, high-tech engineering is very big with Denodo. Pharma, healthcare, very big. Government as a whole is very big user of Denodo. And they actually realize all this value that I'm talking about, and business value that I'm talking about, leveraging the logical data layer, right? So let's move on. So I'm actually going to peel the onions a little bit more. Again, a little bit more jargon. Stay with me there. Just to give you a brief of what actually it means when we say how you go about implementing such logical architecture. And CIOs, take note, this is coming your way, right? First of all, we need to integrate data by all means, right? We need to do that because that's where the data is getting consolidated. But the idea here is that we are not going to copy, we are not going to duplicate data. That's the key aspect. Second, I want to manage the data so that I can actually curate the data in the business context and deliver it according to the business users. Third comes the part that I want to deliver, because at the end of the day, it's all about how am I delivering this data to the business consumers, data consumers, or ML, AI project teams, so that they can actually spend time doing models and doing implementations rather than still searching for data, right? I think you all have heard about this concept of, my organization spending 60 to 80% of time managing data, right? And through my own experience, I can share that the 80 to 60, right, is actually a rather smaller percentage. In my own experience, I've actually seen is much bigger than that, sometimes even 90. I give you a reason why, right? The reason is if I actually say, hey, you data science team, AI team, ML team, go and look at our enterprise data. Enterprise data is all over the place, right? And now I want you to build a model to optimize my campaigns, for example. You think what they will do first as a data scientist? They will actually go search for the data. But if you realize, coming back to architecture I laid out earlier, right? There's data warehouse, there's big data, there's Excel all over the place, right? There is data lake. There's also a lot of streaming data coming through my API channels. Where do they start? Where will my data scientist team start, right? That's the big problem. And that's why, because they're looking and searching for this data, that's the reason why they're spending 60 to 80% time looking and managing data. What if, right? What if I actually, using this logical layer, I integrate data for you logically. I manage the data. This is where the curation part coming in. I manage the data in a business context and delivering that to my users in a business form that they can use, right? Now, I'm not saying that it's going to solve all their problems in terms of searching and looking for data, but I can definitely tell you that it can reduce down the 80% of time spent to possibly about maybe 20 or maybe 40. That's a lot of saving, right? Not only from the cost perspective, but go to market, right? Go to value and go to insight. Now, coming to the fact that what's going to happen next is delivery, right? So we know that all the source system that is there, we talked about SAP just now, but there are many other forms of application data that is available. In Denodo, we actually provide more than 150 native adapters, meaning I do not need to go and crack my head on how to build that. These are all available, native adapters, go and connect and get the data in, right? And once the data is available in the Denodo, all we do, because we are now talking about logical, right? When we say logical, we are talking about metadata, right? So we actually manage and curate this metadata so that that can be actually delivered to the users, right? In this case, the consumption layer can be any of these. It can be your simply BI report platform, dashboards, or what about your data science projects, right? You could be using Python, you could be using SAS, you could be using any other platforms. By all means, all you need to do is coming back to the virtual layer to your very familiar SQL environment. If you have ODBC, JDBC, by all means, use it, right? I'm not going to introduce anything new, right? So this is actually enabling another good value in the organization, which is self-service. Your users who are familiar with whatever tool that they're familiar with, by mean, let's use that, right? And I actually give you a JDBC, ODBC, which is a very, very friendly and very known way of connecting to data. And then go and get the data and then start using it. What is the benefit of doing that? Remember, I talked about this 80% of time spending in looking for data. That is gone away. But I'm not saying that it's going to be zero, right? At least it's a big chunk of it is gone away. Now, come the fact that tomorrow the project changes, right? Then now my data science team say, okay, what would I do? Because the data might not be there. By all means, we actually provide you data catalogs. So data catalogs is basically representation of, again, metadata representation of all the data that's in your organization, and all you need to do is that just search for it, right? Say, for example, I want to look at all the data related to my customers. Search customer, all the data elements come up. All you need to do is combine that, expose it, okay? If you want to expose it to SQL, by all means, but assuming I have an application, mobile application, that I need the data to be consumed through APIs, by all means, right? I have the REST, OData, any other API that is available and need to be exposed that way, we actually deliver that to you, right? So this is the concept of a logical data architecture or a logical data layer that's going to help many organizations move forward without need to grapple with my current traditional architecture of copying and replicating data. I hope that makes sense, right? Okay, let's move on. Right. When we talk about logical data architecture, I think you might come about these two other concepts which is quite predominant in the market. One is what we call as data fabric, which I'm going to talk about a little bit after this. The other one is data mesh. So we actually see how this logical strategy that we're talking about will actually enable your data fabric and data mesh capabilities, right? So let's talk about the data fabric first. So typically when I talk about data fabric, I'm not going to go to the entire definition here, but I will actually highlight two things. One, the second point there is you need to unify data, which is possibly the enterprise data, and deliver that to the consuming layer. Unified, huh? While you're doing that, unifying that, you actually need to take care of the governance, what Geeta mentioned, and I think there's some questions about that too. And you also need to make sure the security is taken care of. Because especially if you look at some of the new move right into the projects and and initiatives, they are talking a lot about, for example, ethical analytics, right? We are talking about a lot of data protection that need to go in, right? Interestingly enough, this platform that we're talking about delivers that to you while you're actually consuming and managing your information. So unified data is very important, and the concept behind data fabric is how do I deliver data as a service, right? So that's the main thing. So I'm actually simplifying this very thick book about the fabric into two words, but basically delivering enterprise data, unified, secured, to the consumers as a service, right? So let's see how we do that. So this is the platform that we talk about, right? The Denodo data fabric or logical data layer. You actually do unified abstraction. Now, I'm actually introducing another concept here, right? When I say abstraction, it is not extraction. When you say extraction, we copy data, replication. But I'm talking about it, we do not want to do that, right? We want to do abstraction because all I'm consuming here is metadata. So bring your metadata in. You actually then build logical models using the metadata again, right? Build the logical models. Once that is done, you actually apply your security, your compliance, your governance on top. Once that is done, all that available to you now is the curated products of your data or the curated services behind how you deliver the products in terms of data to your consuming layer, whether it's application or your users. So at this point, the users or application will come and consume in their friendly consumption layers, consumption protocols, with the choice of self-service capabilities that they are familiar with. No need to change anything, right? Use the tool that you're familiar with, come in, consume the logical layer, right? We are not going to replicate the data. Make sense? If I then switch the gear a little bit and I go into what about data mesh, right? So remember we talked about the definition just now, right? The same definition, which is point number 2, is the same. I want to have unified data, integrated data, right, which is secured, which is governed. But now the key concept behind data mesh is I actually deliver the product, the data, as a product to the consumers. In Fabric, we say service. In Mesh, we say product, right? Now, how do we go about doing it? Same platform, right? The logical Denodo platform. All you need to do is bring your domain. So domain is the important part here, right? The domain will be the one who owns the data, and then they will actually create the data products, right? So domain then will actually go and connect to the different systems, right? Different data layers. They actually then consume the metadata, and then they curate the data products, right? So if I am the owner of customer domain, right, I actually build the product, which is customer, and whatever the related items that need to go along with it. And then what I do is I expose that data product, right, to the consumers, again, through the same friendly consumption layer, right, logically, to the consuming, interface, right? Whether it's the user, whether it's application, whether it's a requirement of a mobile application that need to talk to API, for example, is the same, right? So fundamentally what we're talking about is the logical data layer, data strategy that we're talking about, no copying, right? Very, very important, right? No replication of data. I'm actually working on the metadata I'm consuming, which is the abstract that I'm actually abstracting out from the data layer. Manipulate as much as you wish the metadata layer, create your data services or data product, and allow that to be consumed by the users very, very easily, right? Hopefully that makes sense, right? But again, if you don't or have questions, we have a booth behind there. Please do come and see, and my colleagues will be more than happy to walk you through the details of how we do it, right? So moving on, I want to actually just quickly brief through some of the benefits, right? Here are some of the benefits. Again, for CIOs, this will be key for you, right? I want the organization to be agile, right? How can you be agile if your data will take months or weeks to come to your consuming layer? You can't, right? Logical data layer will actually help you to do that, right? If you look at some of the other things, reducing costs, we talked about it, right? Because we're actually moving away from replication of data, right? We're actually not only saving a lot from the storage aspect of it, we're actually saving a lot from your network bandwidth usage of it, right? So again, there are many other aspects. Another impact, right, from all those things that we're talking about, from a human perspective, if I'm actually being hired as a data scientist in an organization, for example, would I want to spend my time, and typically this will be the 60–80% I'm talking about, searching and looking and curating data? I don't want to do that, and eventually you do not want to let the data scientist to do that too, because it doesn't make sense, right? But if I actually deliver that layer, the logical layer, and let the users to consume, that is the beauty, right? How much time I have, sorry? 2 more minutes, okay, good, okay. And of course, secured governance, unified, we talked about it. And this is a study that we did with Forrester. So I do not want to just talk about Gartner, right? So Forrester, we actually work with them too. So these are some of the good benefits that we talked about. The improvement in terms of the ETL process versus a logical architecture. Reduction of go-to-market, right? Either go to insight, go to market, go to revenue is actually immense when you apply the logical strategy into your data management, right? Moving on very quickly. In the future, what is the future like? Because you all will be having this plan to go into data fabric, implementing data fabric and data mesh. This is the kind of benefit that you can actually achieve as CIOs in the organization, right? By implementing a logical data strategy to modernize your current data architecture, okay? Now, I want to just spend maybe 1 or 2 more minutes to just talk about a story, just one case, right? Here is a big organization. I think some of you might know. Hopefully next year, if I come back, I can present one of the cases from India, right? BHP is a very big organization, we all know. Their problem is, the operations is throughout the world, right? But they actually have a problem, big issue of consolidating data from the Asia, UK, China, Central America, Australia, to have a consolidated view. Because what they want to do is actually enterprise risk management, right? They were grappling with this issue for many, many years. But with the help of Denodo, they could actually solve that. Now, with the logical architecture, they bring all the data together, right? And then publish that for the users. Not only that, they could also apply enterprise-wide risk management portfolio on top. But how do they do that, right? Because you realize that it's all over the way, all over the geographical locations. This is the architecture, right? Very quickly. They, of course, started in Australia, but eventually they grow. So what happened is, they actually implemented logical architecture in each of the data centers where they operate. So the logical data layer is actually developed in each of the centers, and it is all consumed centrally in their HQ, which is in Perth. So they have a logical view at the departmental or geographical layer. They can also consolidate all the logical views centrally at the HQ and delivering them the risk management portfolio implementation very, very quickly. All this using logical data architecture. It's proven, even though it's a complex implementation like this, it can work, okay? So with that, I maybe want to just leave with you one takeaway. All you need to think about now, today when you go to sleep as a CIO, stop collecting and start connecting. You do not want to replicate data anymore, right? Okay, with that, thank you very much. Namaste.
Thanks a lot, sir. We'll open up for questions. Do we have any questions for him?
Easy questions, please.
See, now, we are speaking about
I
data.
think can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, good.
Now we are speaking about data. Data is a very big jargon, okay, let me tell you. Now, we have, from an external compliance, now we will be having compliance like POPI Act or in certain African countries, or we will have other acts that will be coming up.
Sure.
The first basic thing is, you cannot store your customer data, like an example, a use case if I say, customer data for above a period of time, or these are the things. Now you have multiple applications like this, now you have multiple sources of things. Implementation of it is not as easy. So now you have done in so many countries, now what you are offering as a solution can give an entity that, okay, now the government passes a rule that it should not stay. By click of a button or by doing 4 or 5 steps, would be able to get this complied?
Okay, very good question. Thank you for the question. In fact, it's a very sweet spot for Denodo. When the GDPR came up in Europe, many organizations were thinking, what should I do? Interesting enough, many actually implemented Denodo because Denodo not only the logical layer. A very important thing that we are interesting about GDPR is we do not want to copy data because that's not what you should do. But how can I apply this data security framework, a data protection framework, without copying the data, but I actually do it at the layer, which is a logical layer. But when I expose the data to the users, it is all taken care of in terms of the compliance. So what we do is we actually apply the rules and logics of that protection, anonymization on the logical layer itself. When a user consumes the data, I'm not copying the data, but when the data comes through the logical layer, I actually get the data that I'm supposed to see in a way that I'm supposed to see. Right? First, I'm not copying the data, but the logic is there, exists in the logical layer.
And limited to the structured data, not
Yes.
unstructured data.
Yes. right? And do come over, we can actually explain a little bit more. But that is one example. But in the healthcare, for example, there's another big requirements and compliance coming up. And for those, we can actually then apply the logic the logic in terms of transmission, data protection in the logical layer. Another issue that we face in some of the other financial sector kind of situation is you cannot move data out of the particular location. You need to somehow keep the location intact. For example, China data cannot move into the central location. What do? The trick there is you cannot move the raw data, but if it is summarized data, you can do it, right? Which is anonymization in place. So in the logical layer, we are not moving, again, first of all, we are not moving data to start with, but if I actually just consume the aggregated information, right, we are complying to the issues. And Denodo can help actually with that kind of architecture. Thank you for the question.
A quick question, in the sense, be it a lake or a fabric or a mesh, what we really struggle with in the industry is actually the data observability and the data downtime. How do you do it in your organization, and how does your product support that structure?
Okay, it is a big topic. We can definitely help. I would actually say that maybe we can talk separately, but let me give you some examples. This product that we're talking about has been molded, enhanced, and enriched over the last 20 years, right? So when it comes to, one of the big questions that in CIO's mind you'll have when I talk about this a while ago, you say, how do you guys handle performance, right? Because we're actually moving, quite amount of information across through the logical layer to the consuming layer. I'll be more than happy to speak about it, but not today, but in the booth, I'll be there to help you guys out. The other aspect is how do you consolidate that information and copying and so on. One of the techniques that we use is actually caching. And we have a smart, intelligent caching approach. Again, in memory, on data, that to actually help that facilitate that kind of requirements. But again, let us discuss a little bit more, right, later on. But definitely we can achieve that, successfully. Easy questions, please.
Yeah, this is Manan from Accenture.
Yes.
So one of the key challenges within the whole data strategy space is around the scalability, and you were talking about the performance issues, right? So could you also just touch base upon what are the key aspects that Denodo offers in terms of scalability when dealing with, let's say, terabytes of petabytes of the data?
Okay. When Denodo look at a schema that is request, the SQL request is coming from a user. Say, for example, this is a data science team just requesting data after they look at all the data that they need. First thing what actually happen in Denodo is that he looks at the schema, he looks at how do I optimize the schema before even I execute it. So that is one level of optimization that's taking place. There's a immense level of intelligence that's built in to smart way of improving the query processing. The second layer that we do is we decide on where is the best place for this execution for data to be queried, to be executed, all right? So one typical way that we do is, if the data is coming from a layer of platform that we talked about a while ago, right? Whether it's your data warehouse, whether it's your data lake, Snowflake, for example, if we decide after looking at the plan that this particular query should be optimally pushed down and be executed at that platform, by all means, right? We actually from Denodo take care of that, execute wherever it is, up comes the the aggregated data, and that is what we expose to the users. All right, that's true, but there are many techniques that we can discuss about. Do come over, we'll talk about it. So I don't have time for more, is it?
Great, thank you
I'll
so
be more
much.
than
I'll
happy
request attendees, if you still have any questions, we have their booth outside. Please go visit, and you can have your questions answered one-on-one.
And today when you go to sleep, remember, no collection, only connecting, right? Thank you, guys.